Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression. Whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, as usual, is my co-host, my sister from another mother, the author of Self-Love Revolution, Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. How are you, sister?
Thank you. I am doing well. How are you? It is
I am fine.
burning hot here, but that is okay.
Yeah. Better hot than cold.
Yes. Yeah, I'll take the heat.
So speaking of the series so far, just before we begin, next week we'll be reviewing the women we've done in the 12 weeks preceding. So, but for this, 12 weeks preceding, yes. So this is the second group of 12, 24 episodes in. And so for this week, we're going to be looking at the lives and times of, it's difficult to describe her. What else can be said about her? First things first, who is she and where is she from?
Who am I and where am I from? I am from the area in Africa called Ghana. I was born back in 1942, and some of you may have people who are still alive. I have joined the ancestral realm, but I lived my life fully while I was here. My life, how will I even start to talk about my life now? There's so much that.
Let's begin in terms of your parents. Usually that's the roots. So who are your parents?
My parents, it brings back a lot of memories, even to ask me that question, because my parents were a different kind of people, and the way they raised me and what I was able to do was as a result of everything that they poured into me. I should start with my grandfather. My grandfather was actually killed fighting colonialism. I was born on March 23rd, 1942, in a place that they called Salt Pond in the Gold Coast. Of course, those are not our names. Those are the names that the colonizers who are still there to some degree, and even if they're not there physically, they're still meddling in our affairs. I was born into the Fanti royal household. And my father was Nana Ya Fama, chief of Abiadi Kiakwa. And my mother was Mame Abasema. I was actually born a twin. My twin brother was Kwame Ata. But neocolonial forces killed my grandfather, and that deeply influenced my family and me in terms of our emphasis on education and also coupled with cultural consciousness. And I have to make the distinction because the education was you must learn the Western ways so that you can fight, but not abandon who you are culturally. So being born into this Fanti royal household, I got to learn of my culture in a very intimate way. But my father was one of those very visionary men who understood the importance of both male and female getting educated. Back then, many times families will make the decision that only the male should get quote unquote a formal education, a Western education. And the women will kind of be left to just be child bearers and rearers. But my father insisted on all of the young people in our area getting even that Western education as well. And so initially, when I was a child, there was no school, Western style school in our area. We have to walk a long way to get to school. And my father made it possible for there to be a school in our community so that all the children had relatively easy access. And there was no distinction when I was growing up between me and my brother. In fact, it wasn't until I went to the university and I started to see the distinctions that I even realized that in this world, people had the notion that women were somehow inferior or should not aspire to be everything that they could possibly be, how they were made by their creator. So education was a very important piece of my growing up. So after my initial education at the elementary, the primary level, I went to the Cape Coast and I attended Wesley Girls High School, where I discovered my passion for writing. There's so much power in words. Yes, we need engineers. Yes, we need doctors. Yes, we need all kinds of people with all kinds of education. But that's part of being able to think, to read, and to write, to put your thoughts down, was instilled in me at a young age. And so I attended Wesley Girls High School from 1857. And by 1961, I enrolled at the University of Ghana, Gone. And there I earned a Bachelor of Arts in English in 1964. I also wrote my first play, which was staged in March of 1964 at the university and then was published in 1965. That first play was called The Dilemma of a Ghost. Then, like I said, it was published in 1965. And you would not believe this, but that made me the first African woman dramatist to be published in English. Now, I make that distinction to be published in English because it's not like women had not been creating dramas, folk tales, the ways that we had our cultural displays. We had been doing that. But in terms of being published in English, I was the first African woman dramatist to be published in English. Didn't stop my education there, even though there were whispers of if you're a woman, you don't want to get too much education because then you will scare men away. So I did marry quite all right. I married in the 60s. I don't talk too much about the marriage because, again, a woman is a human being, a full human being when she is born. She does not only become somebody because she's somebody's wife or somebody's daughter, And so I got married. That marriage did not last long, so we will not talk too much about it. And I did have my child. I had one child, one daughter, who carries on my legacy today. So I now my husband was a lawyer. We left Ghana and I went to Stanford University in 1970, where I earned a master's degree in English, aided by a creative writing fellowship. I have to tell this story. It's important to tell this story. At that time, it was like they would find what they considered the best and brightest minds, and they would pretty much just throw money and fellowships at us, to pay for the plane ticket, to pay for our tuition where we were going, and so on and so forth. And so I went to Stanford University in 1970, and I got this creative writing fellowship. And then I subsequently returned to Ghana. After returning to Ghana, I taught at the University of Ghana in the Institute of African Studies and also at the University of Cape Coast, eventually rising to the rank of professor and doing my very best to shape the minds of our young people that were being assaulted by this notion that we imbibed through our Western education. So we got the education to be able to fight back. But the very education that we were seeking actually turned us against ourselves.
You've been co-opted to
Where
do the bidding.
we started to imbibe this idea of we're not good enough. You read these major writers from the West who, ascribed us to like less than animals, that we did not even have the intelligence of monkeys. So how do you get educated, but at the same time, you are learning? Education is supposed to develop you, bring out the best of you. But
Broaden your
that
mind.
educational process is teaching you that you are nothing unless you empty yourself out and take on what they're giving you. So not developing what's inside you, but empty yourself, take on what they're giving you, which tells you are inferior, and that to progress, you have to embrace everything that is foreign to you, that is alien to you. So in 1982, I was appointed as Secretary for Education under Ghana's PNDC military government, which was led by a man that you may have heard of, Jerry Rawlings.
Like Lieutenant General Rawlings, yeah.
At that point, I became the first woman in that post, but I did not last long in that post because, like my father, my idea was education should not be the purview of just a few. It should be something that is made available free to everybody. Every child should have an opportunity to develop themselves. Well, apparently for some people, that was too radical of an idea. And so I lasted about a year in that formation as the Secretary of Education. How are you going to be the Secretary of Education? Of course, our form of government was very much not based on our own cultural consciousness, but on copying the West. And then in that position, when I say free education for everybody, that is too novel of an idea. And so I ended up resigning from that position in 1983. And I felt that Ghana at that period was not a place where I could actively be myself and speak my mind freely without repercussions. That could even include death. And so I entered into a self-imposed exile in Zimbabwe. I heard at the beginning you were talking about you've been covering a lot of women. How many of those women experienced this same exile that I'm going to talk about? Maybe imposed on them or sometimes just out of self-preservation. We had to leave the place that we called home, the place that we wanted to build, the place that we wanted to make improvements on. It's a very painful experience. But I went to Zimbabwe, which at that point had really taken off in terms of trying to break away from their own colonial beginnings.
Yeah.
At one point it was called Rhodesia. And anyone who wants to know again, the power of words. Where did that name come from? If people come in where we have our own names and then they impose something else on us. It was named after a very evil man that all your listeners, your viewers should know about. Cecil Rhodes. And so this place was now called Rhodesia after him. But while I was there, the Zimbabwean government embraced me. I worked in their curriculum development unit of their Ministry of Education, and I contributed to the Zimbabwe Women's Writers Group. And while I was in Zimbabwe, I really focused on writing and publishing children and poetry books. Later, I left and I taught as a visiting professor in the United States and in Kenya. And I held another scholarship from, again, the West, a Fulbright. I was awarded a Fulbright scholarship in 1988. Again, just funding sources. You always have to question where your funds come from and their motivation for providing those funds. I also then became a writer in residence at the University of Richmond in 1989. And I even taught at the Hamilton College in the early and mid 1990s. And then from 2004 to 2011, I was a visiting professor in Africana Studies at Brown University. Of course, again, your viewers should understand the interconnections because we had an Africana Studies at Brown University because of the agitation of African American students and African students who said we cannot just come to these universities to imbibe your information, to learn to hate ourselves. We want to study our own history as well. I chaired the Ghana Association of Writers Book Festival from its start in 2011. And then I went on to serve as the patron of the Etisalat Prize for Literature. It's now known as the Nine Mobile Prize, which was initiated in 2013. And I was awarded the Aidoo Snyder Book Prize for African women's writing, obviously named in my honor as well. So some of my publications that your listeners may be aware of, and if they're not, then I'm making them aware of them now, even though some of them were published, relatively, you can say a long time ago.
You are listening to Women and Resistance with Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation. They're still
I
available.
believe that the themes are still very relevant today.
Yeah.
So I published The Dilemma of a Ghost, the play that I talked to you about. That was in 1905. Then I published Anowa, a play that was based on Ghanaian folklore. Because, like I said, we have been traditions, maybe not written in English, maybe not written at all, but we come from a very rich culture. And our folk tales, our folklore was a way of passing on knowledge from generation to generation. So that one was published in 1970. Then I had a collection of short stories that I also published in 1970 called No Sweetness Here. And one of my favorite books, somewhat autobiographical, was Our Sister Killjoy. This is one of the earlier publications of it, if you can see this, published by the Longman African Classic.
We read
This
that in
was the
secondary
time
school.
when you can see the paper, the sheets are very yellowed now.
We read that.
Yes. This was a time when, again, the colonizers, because they don't do anything out of the goodness of their hearts. Let's just establish that right now. But they found out we can exploit these writers. Yes, I'm grateful for being published, but we can create a new market, or we can tap into a new market of African writers writing their own stories that we sell back to them, and we keep most of the money.
Yeah.
Because they told me that my books were sold all over the world.
But no money.
But ask me, why am I still poor? Why am I still going around having to work in places for all the books that I sold? Then I published, so that Sister Killjoy, or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint, it was a novel published in 1977. Then I now published Someone Talking to Sometime. It was a collection of poems, published that in 1986. And then also in 1986, this was during my time in Zimbabwe, I published The Eagle and the Chickens and Other Stories. These were all children's stories. I also published Birds and Other Poems in 1987. And then 1991, I published Changes, a love story. And here is an older, there are newer iterations of it, but this is an older
Old version.
copy version again. And you can see
Newsprint.
again the yellow pages on this. Yes. This one was published in 1991, and it won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in Africa in 1992. I was not done writing. I also published in 1997 through Heinemann African Writers Series. Again, Ask Me Where the Money Is. I published The Girl Who Can and Other Stories. And then in 2006, I edited African Love Stories. Listen, we are full, complete human beings. In fact, it annoys me to even have to say that. Because who in their humanity has to now come out and every day try to prove their humanity? Except for people who their very humanity is being challenged by these colonizers. We too love. And our love is as varied and as deep and as high and as low as anybody else's love. We have all everything. We encompass everything. So that was published in 2006. And then in 2012, I also published Diplomatic Pounds and Other Stories. These are fairly easy reads, something that you can have by your nightstand before you go to sleep. You read a story, you get some understanding. So as I mentioned before, husband, I married one time, I did not marry again. For reasons that you can probably figure out if you read my books. But I was married to Kofi Ako, who was a Ghanaian lawyer and then a politician. And my daughter is Kina Likimani, who was born 1969 in Nairobi, because I was in Kenya at the time. And I raised Kina largely as a single mother. Did not spend my breath, wasting my breath discussing the specifics of my marriage. It was not too important. There are many awards that have come my way. I will just get this out of the way, and then we can really talk about my work and my writing and the message that I believe still is of very great relevance today. So I got the Mbari Club Prize in 1962 for my short story, No Sweetness Here. I also was awarded the Nelson Mandela Prize for Poetry for Someone Talking to Sometime. That award came in 1987. And then the Commonwealth, as I said, the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, Africa Region, in 1992 for Changes. My play Anoa was listed among Zimbabwe's Africa's 100 best books of the 20th century at the Zimbabwe International Book Fair in 2002. I was also the subject of a documentary. I think that documentary was in 2014. The Art of Ama Ata Aidoo. And my niece, Yaba Bado, she's the one who put that together. It's very strong women that we raised, In 2002 was when I founded the Mbasem Foundation in Accra with my daughter to support African women writers. Because let me tell you, life has not been easy for African women. Now, having said that, it hasn't been easy for women all over the world either. So I don't want it to seem that, as they would like to say, oh, the African woman is so wretched. We're no more wretched than any other group of women, because patriarchy is a poison that flows freely throughout all the world, that came into Africa and upended some of our traditions, And now African men are carrying that patriarchy on their heads. And if you read my books again, you will see that theme of this struggle that women have, not just against African women have, not just against colonialism and neocolonialism, but also now within their community, within their very homes. That issue of gender and gender roles and the identity and the impact of patriarchy on it. And so that was the reason that we started the Mbasem Foundation, to support African women writers, to encourage African women to write our own stories, to share our own perspectives on any manner of topics. And then, of course, in March of 2017, they launched the Ama Ata Aidoo Center for Creative Writing at the AUCC in Accra. Of course, named obviously in my honor. I was most definitely a critic of post-colonial governance and nationalism. I believed and continue to believe in African identity, and that African identity must be centered in intellectual and cultural life. It can't be, I learned this and I'm this over here, and then it's this other thing on the side over here. No. African identity must be the center. It should be the foundation upon which we build anything else. And so, like I shared, when I tried those reforms in the education ministry under Jerry Rawlings and they were blocked left, right, and center, I resigned from that post. I believe, and I know this to be true, even amongst my detractors, I am respected for my outspokenness on feminism. Now, I can give you my definition of feminism because, when people use terms, it's important to define what those terms are. Feminism, for me, it's an ideology. It's an ideology that means that anybody can be a feminist and should be. Because everybody should be okay, they should be settled, they should be fine with women being their full selves, being their whole beings. That is all that means to me. I don't know how other people define it. I'm not struggling with anybody beyond that. Everyone should embrace the right for women to accomplish at whatever levels they're capable of, just like men do. White men, of course, in particular. So very outspoken. I was very outspoken on feminism, which did not endear me to both men and women. Because let me explain this to you. Any oppressed class, when you study it, one of the reasons they are oppressed is that they participate in their own oppression. And so what you would see is that even amongst women, the weight of patriarchy is so heavy and is so interwoven now into all aspects of our existence that women themselves have a problem with fighting against what has been presented as the way things should be. So when you are a woman that is saying, no, the way things are is not the only way it should be, there are different ways, then you become a threat even to women who are saying, you're a troublemaker. Why are you, trying to use a Western euphemism, trying to upset the apple cart? Just follow along and know your place, And I was never one to allow other people to determine what my place should be. I also was very outspoken against anti-imperialism. I spoke up against imperialism. And of course, preached what should be the religion, if you will, the theology of African autonomy. What group of people do not want to be autonomous? My views sometimes challenged both traditional and Western paradigms, because wherever it was coming from to make women less than who we are capable of being, I was going to challenge it. And of course, this engendered some very vigorous intellectual debates. And in some places, the doors were open, and in some places, the doors were they attempted to nail the door shut. When I think about African women's marginalization, one of the things I've said is that the decay of Africa's social, political, and economic systems is directly related to the complete marginalization of women from developmental discourses. So while you have a group of people who make up arguably at least half of the population, and then when it comes to any conversation on how we develop, how we move forward, you leave their voices, you leave their perspectives, you leave their input out. How is that supposed to work? When I wrote my book, Sister Killjoy, I very much critiqued Africans who lose their cultural memory when they're educated abroad. But here is the tragedy, my son. Now, we don't even have to go abroad to lose our cultural identity. This Western education has so seeped into our psyche that the elites perpetuate our own inferiority. And so now, instead of eating fufu with my hand, if I eat it with my hand, I'm an animal. I must eat with fork and knife. I can eat with fork and knife, yes, no problem with that. But why does one have to be seen as better than the other? When if we really do a critique, you understand the intimacy of taking in food. If you're now afraid of your own hand, touching your food and touching your mouth, and you need some external object, it's symbolic of our issues. So I very much challenged, and this might be a challenge to you because I understand you are based in the UK, very much challenged my brothers and sisters who would go and get the white man's education and then abandon everything that their people stood for in total, completely. And you now want to outwhite the white man. And then you bring those ideas, if you bother to come back, you bring them back and poison the waters where we are. And you wonder why Africa is still not liberated today. Well, before I take your questions, and I want to read some of my poems to you as well. I made my transition to the ancestral realm where I continue to fight. 31st, 2023. I was at the young age of 81. And it's such an ironic thing that the very government that at one point did not value me and my message now honored me with a state funeral. Now they're going to embrace me, daughter of Ghana, one of our own. And my services were even televised from July 13 to July 15, 3 days. I laid in state in my hometown in Abiadzi, Kiako. And then my burial following a Thanksgiving church service was held on July 16th of 2023. And I am buried in my hometown community, resting with my ancestors. Although many of us are not at rest, we are fighting because there's so much to I had, as I shared briefly a little bit, I had many lectures, I had many residencies in American institutions, including the University of California, Smith College, and Mount Holyoke. These appointments were very helpful since I did not see the money from my books. And they allowed me to be in a position to mentor students, to mentor African students wherever the boat had dropped us off or whether we had stayed in our countries and now traveled, but to be a mentor to the students, to share African feminist and post-colonial thought, and of course, to continue my writing. I did not live in Europe necessarily, but I traveled extensively for literary festivals, for conferences, for speaking engagements, and I participated in many lectures, many panels, even across the UK and continental Europe, particularly in support of African literature and feminist discourse. But in the early 2000s, I returned to Ghana to live permanently after my many years of sojourn in what we call the abroad. And in Ghana, I was able to return to my culture, to my life in a more meaningful way, to continue my cultural work and my education activism, because what are you if you are not building at home? So if you will permit me, I want to
Share a poem.
share some of my poems. This is from the African Poetry Book series. This one is called After the Ceremonies, New and Selected Poems. And let me read some, and then we can be in conversation and you can ask me any questions. There are so many poems, that many of my poems are a little long. So I try to choose some that are not too long for your audience at this time. So my understanding is you have at one point reviewed a woman who was very dear to me. Her name was Bessie Head.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to read a poem that I wrote for Bessie Head, and it is titled For Bessie Head. Bessie Head's life really captures a lot of the struggles of African women on our own continent. Any of your viewers who did not follow along when you did that, you need to go back and not only hear what you shared, but read her words for yourself as well. So, to begin with, there's a small problem of address. Calling you by the only name some of us knew you by. Hailing you by titles you could not possibly have cared for. Referring you to strange and clouded origins that eat into our past, our pain, like prize-winning cassava tubers and abandoned harvest fields. Some of us never met you. And who would believe that? But those who know the tragedies of our land, where non-meetings, visions on opening, and other such abortions are early and everyday reality. To continue a confession of sorts, Miss Head will just not do. Bessie, too familiar. Bessie Head. Your face swims into focus through soft clouds of cigarette smoke and from behind the much harder barriers erected by some quite unbelievable 20th century philosophy, saying more of your strength than all the tales would have us think. For the moment. For the moment, we fear and dare not accept that given how things are, poetry almost becomes dirges and not much more. But we hold on to knowing ourselves as daughters of dark light women who are so used to life, giving it, feeding it. Death was always quite unwelcome, taking them by surprise. An evil, peevish brat to be flattered, cleaned, oiled, pomaded, overdressed, and perfumed. We fear to remember. Fatigued as we are by so much death and dying, and the need to bury and to mourn, Bessie Head, such a fresh ancestress. If you chance on a rainy night to visit, if you chance on a sunny day to pass by, look in to see how well we do, how hard we fight, how loud we scream against the plot to kill our souls, our bodies too, to take our land and feed us shit. Come benevolently, dear fresh spirit, that rejoining the others, you can tell them that now more than ever do we need the support, the energy to create, recreate, celebrate, nothing more, absolutely nothing less. And I will share one more. This one is titled A Question from the Expatriate Community. To Karidako for her good-natured cynicism and Kina for her education. Propose or something other that I cannot remember, and smug in the plans for her own future. She had asked me, with a frankness born of long friendship and short memory, deliberately cultured, whether I can see myself growing old here. And I remember you and your clear views on Ghanaian emigres the whole world over, forever postponing life and living as we ready ourselves for a beckoning old age. When, as elders of the clan and our hairs dyed beyond infant black, we shall sit after a little something in the morning, a little something at noon, a little something in the evening, admired by siblings and other ancillary brothers and sisters who could never have done as well as we, since they stayed at home, and held with due respect in the caring arms of their offspring, our grateful nieces and nephews, to whom we dispense our black market supported favors and wisdoms, both the hard currency and the experience acquired from unspeakable humiliations in other people's lands. We shall try then not to remember the daily insults, promotions denied, our children having to move to harsher climates in pursuit of education, since as the dependents of foreigners forget how high their grades or how keen their desire, they simply cannot get into the army or schools for would-be doctors, engineers, lawyers. Our wife. The list of exclusions in these foreign lands is very long. But mind you, all Africans treat all other Africans from beyond their borders like shit, or at best as flotsam and jetsam. My friend, where were you all the time? I was asking if you can see yourself growing old here. In my mind's eye, the image of me as the adored elder of the clan recedes, disappears. I do not tell my friend what I am thinking. That if what I am feeling now is not old age already, then frankly, it signifies little where the real thing finds me. I shall be beyond caring, an unprepared, unsecured wanderer. In any case, remind her, such questions are meaningless for those who are not at all sure they have a choice. I will stop there.
The two poems you read, the words are.
Can you speak up a little bit? I can't hear you so well.
I said the two words. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the two poems you read are powerful because in the beginning you said something along the lines of choosing names, being called names that you have no powers in doing so. So that will form the basis of my first question, which is
I didn't tell you. You know, my name was Christina.
Which is what I was coming to.
Okay. Ask your question then.
So I noticed when you started publishing with The Dilemma of a Ghost, the name you published or the pseudonym you went under was Christina Ama Ata Aidoo.
Yes.
But over times, Christina made almost
to go.
Was that a conscious decision?
Absolutely, it was a conscious decision. The more I learned about our colonizers, the more it made no sense to me that we have our own names with our own meaning tied to our own culture, and then we abandon those names or add those names to the names that will make us more acceptable. Who am I trying to prove myself to? Christina? No. I gave that name up and I focused on a name that reflected my cultural heritage, even as they do. I have no problem with anybody's names. They answer John or Peter or Svetlana, whatever they answer. Why can we not answer our own names? Why are we the ones? And the Asians do this too. Colonized people do this. You want to be accepted. And you think that the more you give up of yourself, the more they will accept you. But let me tell you about these people, in case anybody is still unaware. In the 500 plus year history, what these people do is they take and they take and they take everything. They take our food, they take our cocoa, they take our rubber, they take our gold, they take our diamonds, they take our plutonium, they take our timber. Where will Europe and the West be without all the things they have looted from Africa? Where? You want to call us third world and underdeveloped. Where would they be without all the things that they have taken and continue to take? And they were not content with that. Then they had to take our bodies. And if we allow them, they will take our souls. Now they have taken our memories. The reason why I write, we must remember. They take your memory. What are you, a zombie? You just do their bidding. Listen, you can't compromise with these people. There's no insatiable. A pit that can never be filled is what they are. There's no level of they will take to one level and then they will say, okay, let's remain this part for you. You have this part of any of your things and even of yourself. They want to own you completely and everything. How can you embrace that and buy into that? Oh, I had to give up Christina. Yes. It was a very conscious decision.
Okay. With the last quote you gave, explanation, you talked on the next part I was going into, which was neocolonialism. You made mention of the fact that at some point you had to leave Ghana and make your way to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Did you experience the pressures of neocolonialism in Zimbabwe whilst you were there?
Is there a place on the face of this earth where you will not experience the greed of white people? Is there a place? Even the people minding their business in the Amazon forest, they've gone there to bother them as well. I'm telling you that there's not, yes, for a country that had been previously named Rhodesia, yes, of course. But you find ways to still try to work. Because what will you do? Will you abandon your people? You try to find ways to still figure out places where you can work, where you can help us to remember, where others can help you to remember. We have forgotten so much, my brother, and that physical death is not the issue. We are living and dead spiritually, off like that fork and knife, off from the very thing
You're supposed to be
feed our bodies and our souls and our spirits. So yes, Rhodesia was a place of refuge for some time from the very repressive regime of Jerry Rawlings. Yes, he had some good points and some things that he did, but this tendency for autocracy, this tendency of patriarchy, to again, similarly to how colonialism, these are colonizers take from us, then our men now want to subjugate and marginalize and crush women and fit us into their very narrow ideas of who we should be and what we could be. But there were still issues in Zimbabwe, as there continue to be issues all over the continent of Africa and everywhere that oppressed people are. Everywhere. The issues are the same. Even amongst the white women, the whole idea that they came up with their feminism, and I understand, again, that's why I defined it for myself. They know the struggles they have with their menfolk. But this is the thing about these white people. How they poison. We did not have tuberculosis before these people showed up. Go and ask the Indians who died in mass of smallpox and all kinds of diseases. They did not have those diseases before. Of course, we know in their case, these people took blankets that were used by people with the disease and brought them as gifts. You need to know your culture. You need to remember so that you be careful what you're accepting. Because you have a mindset of how you treat people. You know, Africans were very hospitable people. You also assume that this person coming smiling and bringing you a gift, that they come in goodwill. No, they came to take. They came to poison. They brought all kinds of diseases. Let me tell you, AIDS. Abi, they were saying something about came from monkeys, so on and so forth. What did they not manufacture it in their labs? All the ways that they have conspired to eliminate us. Even now, both the education that I was talking about, but even how we eat. You know that there are diseases that we're dealing with now in our countries that were unheard of when we were eating our food. But they come and then they sell you on, you want to eat like us. You abandon your traditions, so much so that if someone brings ugali for you now to eat, or gari, that is not civilized.
Yeah.
And you just go along with them. And it's killing you. And you are not even aware anymore. What are we chasing? Africa must remember, and for us to remember, all of you that are listening now, you need to be reading and you need to be writing. One, we must write about our own experiences. Who is going to tell our stories if we do not find ourselves valuable enough to tell the stories? Now, it's one thing to value yourself and know your story, but we also have this other issue of time. Again, all the ways that our very souls are stolen from us. One of the reasons I could write as much as I did, I publish as much as I did, if you ask me, if I was telling you, just me and you talking, although I know we have an audience, was because I was no longer under the rulership of a husband per se. That should not have to be the case. Because what you still see, even amongst educated women, world over, not just African women, but world over, we're now out, I say now out for the industrialized world. Of course, African women, we were always part and parcel of our communities. We worked, we brought in food, we did, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But to the extent that we're now out working these jobs, we will go out and work the same hours as the man is working for less pay, while worrying about childcare, while dealing with pregnancy and worrying about, would they now say, oh, I'm less valuable because I had children? But being told that my sole value is in is in motherhood, not even womanhood, it is in motherhood. And I'm the nurturer. So when I finish working the same hours that the man worked for less pay, a woman who has the same education but will be now treated by her peers who are male as though she's a servant in the workplace, serve as secretary, so on and so forth. Then you come home and then you continue with all the quote unquote traditional roles of a woman as well. So you're up before the sun. You are the last one to go to bed. You're exhausted in body, mind, spirit. And then you don't have time to write. You see how all of these things conspire. And then when you don't write, then it's like, oh, what have women contributed? We have a lot of work to do. And I'm encouraging all your viewers, if you're a male, become a feminist. Support women and of course men, but support women in being their full selves. Don't be threatened by them. And if you're a woman, stop buying into your own oppression and being that woman who will point at another woman doing something that you're not doing and tear her down and question whether she's really a woman and see her as a threat because she is doing something that you're not doing. Don't participate in your own oppression.
One other question. Would you say your background, being from a matrilineal society, helped form your character? In the sense that you started with the fact that your father saw the importance of educating girls who will then become mothers, grandmothers, and what have you. But particularly that your society is a society in Ghana, because of its matrilineal position, formed the nucleus of your resistance with regards to external forces.
Yes.
Neocolonialism and the attacks on culture. Would you say that's the case?
Without a doubt. Like I said, until I entered university, so at this time I was a young woman, I'd pretty much, gone through my, basic formative years. The concept that because I was a woman, I was less than, was something that had not crossed my mind. So in that matrilineal society, in that cocoon, men could be their full selves, women could be their full selves. It might look different, it might look the same sometimes, but it wasn't a hierarchy in that sense. And that was the sensibility that I took to college, to university. So when I was now being challenged, quite frankly, the people who were challenging me looked to me to be ridiculous. Now, for a woman who may have been raised in an environment where she was already from childhood taught that because she has XX chromosome, that somehow has made her deficient as a human being, then you can see how that will play mind games with you, and that becomes what do they say, a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you have taken in that information and you have let it permeate your whole body, then that is how you move as a result. So yes, definitely my upbringing and that matrilineal society. And you'll even see that for men who have been raised understanding, if I may use this word, the equality of all human beings, male or female, they also see things differently, even though I must say this patriarchy is so insidious that none of us quite escape it, male or female. Just the ideology that weaker sex, some of the language we use, very similar to how the ideology of racism and the inferiority of African people kind of seeps through everything. So I believe it was in the United States that they did that doll test many decades ago, I believe in the 50s. Yep. And even Black girls were rejecting dolls that looked like them in favor of European-looking dolls. It seeps into your psyche. We have to be very much aware of how it is just in the air and in the atmosphere. And so you have to be extra vigilant to counteract it. And one of the ways is to make sure you're plugged into a source that is purer, that connects you to your memories, your ancestral memories of who we are, what we've accomplished, what we continue to accomplish now that other people take credit for, so that you don't lose your sense of self. Because once you've lost your sense of self, in fact, I don't know if I can find it quickly. I'm looking at the time. In my book, our sister Killjoy, there was a humorous book. Oh, you know what? One of the controversies that came about as a result of this book is that in this book, to some degree, I explore a romantic relationship between two women. And of course, for some people, that was absolute taboo. But one of the themes that I explore in this book is this notion of Africans coming to the West, getting their degrees, and then losing themselves. So let me just read this. Postgraduate awards, graduate awards, it doesn't matter what you call it. But did I hear you say awards, awards, awards? What dainty name to describe this? to describe this most merciless, most formalized, open, thorough spy system of all time. For a few pennies now and a doctoral degree later, tell us about your people, your history, your mind, your mind, your mind. Tell us, boy, how we can make you weak, weaker than you've already been. And don't you get any ideas either. No, no radical interpretive nonsense from you, flat nose. My brother, there should be no misunderstanding, no malice intended. Indeed, our dear academic doctors deserve all the worship they get from our poor administrators at home and more. They work hard for the doctorates. They work too hard, giving away not only themselves, but all of us. The price is high, my brother. Otherwise, the story is as old as empires. Oppressed multitudes from the provinces rush to the imperial seat because that is where they know all salvation comes from. But as other imperial subjects in other times and other places have discovered, for the slave, there is nothing at the center but worse slavery. Whether warming itself up in a single cold room by a paraffin lamp, covering its nakedness and disappointed hopes with the old tickets of the football pools, or glorious with degrees. Above all, what hurt our sister as she stood on the pavements of London and watched her people was how badly dressed they were. They were all poorly clothed. I could go on. One last one that I'm going to read also from this book. This, again, like I said, slightly autobiographical. I was often challenging my brothers and sisters who were in the West and could not possibly see themselves coming back home to work. And as I talked to a brother who had shared eloquently about all of his accomplishments, let me see if I can find that piece in my book here. Anyway, the point that I was trying to make is that he felt he had to prove himself to the white man. He felt that being here, and I mean in the Western world, allowed him to show the white man just how smart we were. And my question is, what are you trying to prove? My goodness, I cannot find where that is at this time. Well, I will leave it at that. But the point that I was making was, not only was he trying to prove himself to the white man at large, I noticed that he also had on his arm a white woman. And it seemed to me quite funny that not only was he performing for the larger white audience, he had also chosen to bring into his home a white woman whom he had to perform tricks for and have a private audience. But you will have to read the book itself. I wrote this book a long time ago, cannot find that, but it's a quick read and it is a funny read. And I certainly encourage your guests to pick up Our Sister Killjoy.
Okay, I just want to summarize some things with regards to what you've told us so far. With regards to the question of food and culture, neocolonialism has done a number on us. You mentioned the idea, you mentioned something to the effect that when you were in the government of Jerry Rawlings, even though it was supposed to be a revolutionary government, your quest to ensure that everybody got free education was undermined. Well, that's neocolonialism in effect when you have the IMF, World Bank come in and they offer to help you. One of the things they expect you to take off the table is educating your masses, feeding your masses, and taking care of their health. Those three things are the first thing they cut. In other words,
beware the smallpox coated blankets.
Yes.
They don't give us any aid.
No,
They're not
nothing.
aiding us. They're
Nothing.
aiding themselves.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it will be important that those in the United States at the moment understand that colonialism that was previously outside has now come back home. So taking away of Medicaid, undermining the education ministry, and making your food much more expensive.
Or non-existent. When you take our land away from us, when we're growing things that we can't consume and selling them for pennies,
yes,
and then using that money to buy guns or to fund conferences for a select group of elites to travel to discuss in foreign lands what must be done on our land, while they spend money and buy up property and things in other people's lands, but don't take care of their people. And think about it. Africa today has the youngest population. The vast majority of Africans are under age 30. When you don't educate those masses, what state do you leave them in? And who benefits from the destitution of a whole generation?
Sure.
And that is not how our education used to be. When we talk about our rites of passage or any of the things that we did to educate, everybody everybody was going to learn a skill that allowed them to be useful in their community. So how do you now embrace an ideology that says only a select few, and then those ones lord it over everybody? And the people who are put in these positions are the ones who are most disconnected from their cultural memory, because they have emptied themselves out and put in Shakespeare and Marx and everybody else, and cannot even speak their language. Do you know what is communicated through language? We could go on forever.
Yes, we could go on forever. We'll go on forever, but unfortunately, Mama, you've left for the ancestral realm. But there is one final point I want to make. When you talked about women should support other women, she had a very dear friend, and there was something in preparing for this program that I noticed.
What did you notice?
She had a dear friend whose name was Miseri Gitai Mugo. She met Miss Mugo in the 60s. She followed the advice of Mr. Mugo, who herself was exiled to Zimbabwe and then the United States. Both, So that friendship, culminated in long years of writing and what have you. So
and sharpening each other's
mind, yeah, exactly.
This is not work you do in isolation. Yeah. You want to be partnered with as many critical thinking people. Yes,
exactly. And then that friendship culminated in a collection of writings in honor of Ama Ata Aidoo that was written when she turned 70. The book was released in 2012. The book was dedicated to their mothers, to Miss Gitai Mugo's mother and Ama Atai's mother. But here's the kicker. They both passed on in 2023, month exactly to the day of each other. So talk about spirituality moving in motion. So for those who want to delve more, that's the book. It's Ama Ata Aidoo at 70. There's actually
put that book. They picked a nice picture of me. Yes, that is how I would just look at people. What are you saying? And your point is, are you even listening to yourself? Does what you're saying make sense? Does it lead to our liberation? Yes.
So, and there is an interview that was conducted by Misere Boots that the two ancestors sat and spoke, and it was very, very, very insightful. They talked about everything. Their writing, their building of community, how they got to know each other.
That's what we women do, though.
Yeah.
When we are connected, we build community. So who are you building community with? Some people just want to be the only one bright shining star, and everybody else they feel threatened by. Who are you building community with? I became more of who I was, better, sharpened, challenged by my dear sister. And I know I did the same for her. Yeah.
So I would want to leave on that note. Who are you building community with? Because for them to resist, they needed people around them to be able to resist. They didn't resist in isolation. It's just that each story is unique, but it's done in community with others. So, question is,
That was one of the things that caused me so much pain, is that for too long, my sister Bessie Head was in a position where she did not have that support
community
and that
around her.
community. Yes.
So, yes,
And yes.
the call to action is, who are you building community with? On that very motivational note, I would like to thank Ama Ata Aidoo for, taking times from and talking to us. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners and audience, the audio version of this presentation can be downloaded at all podcast platforms. And you be well. Next week, we're going to be looking back at Mama Aidoo and the other 12 people before her. So we're going to be doing a review. So if you have questions, please do bring them.
Mm-hmm.
Until next week, it's good night and God bless. That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.